Sam Hackman with Fortitude Welding. Is that how you say it?
Yep.
I don't know
correct.
if it was welding or fabrication.
Fortitude Welding and Fabrication.
Okay.
Yep.
So, welcome to the line, Sam.
Thanks for having me.
Really glad to have you here. So, we're just going to talk through some of your story, your history, and maybe some family and some journey.
Mm-hmm.
And we're here, and our vision. We talk about this a lot, but our vision and our purpose is to lift the view of the skilled trades. And so that's why I wanted to have a conversation with you. I've been seeing some of your posts on Instagram, and we actually have been on a couple of the same projects. So I think that you have a really good story, and I think that's something exciting to share with people. I think they'll find it interesting. So
Yeah, gladly.
well, why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself? Where you come from, where you got started.
Yeah, so I'm from Myerstown, Pennsylvania. I've been here all my life. Have 2 kids, a wife. My house is 1.3 miles down the road, so I can't complain about how close I am to work.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you and I were talking a little bit here about your history,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't know if you can. I mean, I don't mean to put you on the spot here, but you have a very interesting piece of ink on your forearm there.
Yeah, let's see if I can get it out.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So when I first started talking with you, I mean, I don't know if you can see that, Curran. That's pretty cool. That's a picture of, what is that a picture of?
So that's my dad's welding rig when I was a kid.
Yeah.
So he started out as a welder, and now he manages the company that I used to work for. He managed the company I used to work for as long as I was there as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
So he started out doing his own thing and started a company with the owner and his wife, and they sold out to a much larger company since. But we used to do asphalt plants, concrete plants, quarries, heavy industrial. So I was exposed to that all my life. Ever since I was little, he took me to the shop, and the most time I spent with him was in that truck.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's really awesome. So how old were you when he started doing that?
Oh, I was a baby.
Wow.
Yeah, I was a baby.
So you've been on the job pretty much from the beginning.
Yeah, I mean, he didn't take me around when I was that little, of course, and I couldn't go out to quarries and things like that. But I remember when I was, 3, 4, 5 years old, going to the shop that I used to work at.
So what is some of your, when we had talked before, you were talking about that history and that time with your dad. What are some of the things that you experienced growing up, with him working in the industry that he was in and what he was doing, and how did that affect you kind of with where you are today?
I mean, I certainly think that instilled almost all my work drive. Just a constant drive to be better and do more and kind of always in the back of my head to prove myself and my work.
Was it ever a question as far as whether or not you were going to be doing what Dad did, or just from the very beginning, kind of like a welding dynasty, or, I mean, yeah.
I don't know that I ever set out to do what he did for a living. I remember the first time I welded, I was 8. But I actually, when I was in high school and signed up for Votech, I had signed up for machining. Okay. And I went home and told him I signed up for machining. He's like, "You don't want to do machining." He's like, "You want to do welding." So I switched my classes and did 2 years in Votech and got out of that and went to work at a custom race car suspension shop. I did that for about a year. It sounds cooler than it was. Really just standing in a small little coupé looking at a block wall all day. So once I was 18, then I was able to go work for him. And I worked there for 13 years.
Wow.
I was there, I was 21 when I was made a foreman.
Okay.
And then we tore down plants in different states all the time, moved them different states, put them back up, everything from the maintenance to stone crushers and conveyors and power plants and a little bit of food plants. And so tons of firsthand on the job experience.
Yeah. What was it about it that that you liked? Like, why would you go from doing race? I mean, you say you were, there working on race cars. That sounds pretty sexy. What would draw you into, what was it that you enjoyed about what you were doing when you were working with your dad in that company?
So I get bored extremely easy. So in the year's time I was at the race car suspension shop, I was promoted to the highest person there. But really it was just putting parts in a jig, weld them, take them back out. And that wasn't for me. I knew I needed more than that. And with what I used to do there, at my old industrial job, it was constantly changing. We were in different states, different job sites, different scenarios. Nothing, no matter what it was ever the same. Even if you went from one asphalt plant to the next, there always something different to do.
Do you feel like that was like mentally challenging in a good way for you, that always doing something different in those different plants?
Yeah, absolutely. And I was pushed, whether he knew he was doing it or not. My dad pushed me quite a bit, making me a foreman at 21 and so on, putting me out on large jobs, running crews of a dozen guys at a time.
Wow.
Lost a lot of nights of sleep.
What do you feel like you learned through being pushed like that? Like you said, by your dad, but whether he knew it or not. If your dad is like my dad, he doesn't listen to podcasts, so you don't have to worry about that.
Right. I mean, mostly I learned how to problem solve and operate independently, because when you're the foreman out there, unless you're calling back to talk to a project manager, you're the one everybody's coming to figure out how to solve their problems.
So you talk about that, and that's something that I think is pretty cross platforms in the trades, is problem solving. I've talked with excavators, I've talked with electricians, I've talked with, paving guys, and they all talk about problem solving. What do you feel like that problem solving, like for someone who's listening and maybe new to the trades or doesn't even know what you do, what is it that problem solving is for you? Like, how do you go from, here's the problem, here are the issues, what's going through your mind, and what is the process in which you try to solve that problem?
I mean, it's like the old saying, eating the elephant, one bite at a time.
Yeah.
And every scenario is different, so it's hard to nail down one thing, but I mean, you start at the beginning and try and just work your way through step by step. And obviously the longer you're in the trade, the more experience you get.
Yeah. I would say for me, I think that it's funny that you quoted that phrase about eating the elephant, because I say that all the time. You start at the tail and you just take one bite at a time, and
yep.
Next 100 years you'll have it eaten.
Right.
But you also talk about experience, which is something that has been really helpful for me. And there's no, when I was in my 20s, some of the older guys that I would work with, would talk about experience. And I was like, I didn't appreciate it the way that I do now. And I would say now that experience has helped me problem solve faster, and it's like, well, I've done this before and it was this, and it might be slightly different, but kind of going back to that and rehashing it and going over it. And I think the other thing that is interesting about problem solving, it's just not letting your mind stop, continually playing through scenarios and whatnot, and being diligent and pushing through that. So you're in your 20s, you're a foreman now, you're running a crew. So tell me more about that journey.
I mean, going all over the place with different foremen and getting that experience. Obviously they felt I was qualified to be in that position, whether I doubted myself or not, which I did a lot. It was definitely a struggle. Yeah.
Do you think that, kind of looking back at that experience, is there a way that you can learn from that? Like, how do we do that when we're like, so now here you are and you have employees and you're managing people, and you were then as well, but how can someone that's experiencing that, how can we as managers and as people that are leading them help them through that process? Maybe in your experience, as we just talked about, how can we do that better?
I mean, I think we need to not let guys hang out to dry quite so much.
Yeah.
Offer to help a little bit more, get in there with them. I mean, as a foreman working for a small company, I was not the type of sit in the job trailer and run a job type of foreman. I was out there in the thick of it with the rest of the guys. So I had a lot different experience and opinion of foreman than a lot of people do, I guess, that work for much larger companies. That's what they see, the foreman sitting in the job trailer all day, paging through blueprints.
Yeah. Don't you think that helps with the guys in the field, and I say guys, I mean, we have men and women
Sure.
in the trades that we're talking about here. But don't you think that helps as a leader and as a foreman or whether you're superintendent, whatever it is, the people that you're working with, when you've had that experience, when you're working alongside them, it helps give you that mental capability to be able to problem solve alongside them. And I guess the other thing that I would say that I think it does is when you're standing next to them, it helps them understand that you understand what it is that they're going through.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely. I can certainly see where people would get resentment against management and foremen and things like that for the people that aren't out there doing all the work side by side.
Yeah.
That, like I said, that was definitely not the case with where I was from. You had a couple of guys here and there that came through that thought that's how it should be.
Yeah.
Of course.
They never last all that long.
No.
And they don't ever get the jobs done,
right.
for sure.
Yeah. But I mean, it's a huge morale boost as well. We're out there welding on conveyors and whatever else, 100 feet up in the air, and it's pouring rain and blowing and everything else. And the person in charge is right there with you. It makes a big difference.
Yeah. Yeah. So you're in your 20s. Are you married yet at this stage of your career?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you're working with your dad in this company managing, you set up like 12 guys.
Sometimes I'd be out on a job by myself, and other times if we were on a shutdown or whatever, I could have a dozen guys there.
Okay. So you're doing that, you're experiencing that. What then began to happen in your mind that, because we're sitting in your shop right now. This
Right.
is your company here. And I talked with management about my bourbon that I have here, and they said it was all right. So, so you have that ability to be your own boss.
Mm-hmm.
That's a pretty big jump from a pretty, I would say, successful career in a company that your dad is running that is rather large, and I assume a pretty good paycheck.
Yeah. But still better than what I'm doing here now.
Yeah. Yeah. And so why? What was the catalyst, I guess, that made the shift in your mind?
I think it happened over a long period of time. I never got into this with the plan to be self-employed. And really, I was next in line to manage the company, and I didn't want that. That's not the position that I want to be in. I've seen the stress that causes, and I know I didn't want that for myself. A big driving factor is I hated that a customer could call and need someone out in the field to do an emergency repair, and they could get me, or they could get a torch and hammer mechanic out there. And I always take so much pride in what I do because I feel it represents you.
Yeah.
And I was always so proud to have my name on anything I did.
Yeah.
And there's so many people in the trades that are not that way. Either there for a paycheck, slam it together, and move on to the next thing. And I never appreciated that.
Yeah.
And I really hated that customers had to call and ask for me or a couple other guys. I certainly wasn't the only one.
Right.
But over some of the other guys that worked there, and I didn't like that my name and the pride that I took in what I did was kind of being drowned out by a larger company. And I started doing work on the side, again, not ever with the intent to go full-time on my own, but more so somebody, hey, I need this welded. Hey, I need this welded. And it just grew over the course of several years to the point where I'd work 10, 12 hours at my full-time job and come home and work 6, whatever. I'd sleep 3 hours a night for 6, 7 days a week. And I did that for 2 years before I finally bit the bullet and went on my own. It was honestly probably the hardest decision I ever had to make, because I had all the security I needed. I had my kids at that point. And that security is really hard to let go of.
Yeah.
With a family at home and bills and everything else.
Yeah. Yeah. But you did.
I did.
Here we are. And I would assume that was something that, your wife was on board with. I mean, you kind of have to do that as a team.
Mm-hmm.
So as you make that shift in that way, what I'm hearing you say is your big thing was your name was on stuff and you didn't have the control or the authority to be like, well, no, we're not going to do it that way.
Mm-hmm.
But then your name is still being on things. You have a client calling the organization that you work with, asking for this. And when you say, what did you say? Like a hammer mechanic? What did you say?
A torch and hammer mechanic.
A torch and hammer mechanic. So that's probably something that I could do maybe. But, so when you say that, you're talking about just the inability to have the skill to be able to give them what they need in the time that they need.
Yeah, and just the care.
Yeah.
To put more in it than the bare minimum.
Yeah. Yeah. So here at Fortitude Welding and Fabrication, you are now in charge of that.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you do that here, providing that care to the clients? And how do you do that with, you also have your own employees now.
Mm-hmm.
So you have a few employees.
Mm-hmm.
So what is it that you're doing differently here with those employees and the people here and your clients that you're not doing what was happening there? What are the differences? Help me understand that.
I mean, I'm still losing a lot of sleep over it, but
yeah.
Not much has changed there. But again, I'm still here firsthand with these guys all day, every day.
Yeah.
I'm here most of the time before they get here, and I'm definitely always here after they're here.
Yeah.
Getting things ready, and I'm here firsthand showing these guys every step that I take, so everything looks like it goes out with my touch.
Yeah.
And I want them to feel that way too.
And that touch that you're talking about is just a high level of quality and care in the work that you fabricate and send out the door.
Exactly.
That that. And I mean, in some of the things that you fabricate, that's pretty important. I mean, we were just looking at some railing and stuff out there, which is for catwalks that keep people safe.
Right.
So if you don't do your job right, that can really affect someone in a negative way.
Right. And we do a lot of stuff that I can't share.
Yeah.
So a lot of stuff that you see on my page is monotonous stuff, railing or aluminum frames that we do for a sign company. But we do a lot of other stuff that I can't share, some military things and tons of aluminum TIG welding. Things that go in ships and so forth.
So you made that shift. You're here with these guys, and we talked about the torch and hammer mechanic, which I'm going to save that. I like that tagline. You're managing guys. What is it that you do? You talk about being next to the guys and whatnot, but in our industry overall, because you're not the only welder and fabricator out there. What is it that's missing with people in this trade, specifically, because this is where your experience is, that is creating that problem, and what can we do to fix it?
Oof.
Yeah, it's a loaded question.
I was going to say, that's a whole podcast in itself.
Yeah.
I think it comes down to just the person and if they care enough to take pride in what they're doing, or if they're just there for a paycheck and to go home.
Yeah.
I think that's something that needs to be instilled immediately.
Yeah.
And that's something I push for every day, for myself and my guys. I'm very rarely happy with anything I do.
Yeah.
But I always look at something and think I could be better.
Yeah. So with that drive for, I'm going to call it excellence, that you're going after and you're striving for, how do you help your team, your people that you're now managing here? And it's interesting now because now you're the corporate structure, you're the manager, you're the boss, you're the everything. And you have that freedom and that ability to do that. which seems pretty important because to you anyway, because you gave up a lot of security for that. When you're managing and training these people, like you're working alongside them, what is the most important thing that you look for in who you hire? Like, say you're looking to work with someone and they have no experience and they're wanting to get into this trade, they're wanting to work for you. What is it that you're looking for? Like, it's not about, and you've touched on it a couple of times here, but I'm just kind of looking for like a statement of what is Sam looking for, that thing that is deep in someone that can bring a welder out of them, or a fabricator, or even just a high quality tradesperson in the industry.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's not necessarily just the welding skill set that can be trained into anybody that's willing to learn. But that's the biggest thing, is being willing to learn, going into something with an open mind, not acting like you know everything. I've seen that more often than not. People come through, where I used to work was like a revolving door of employees. There was names on the schedule of people we never even met, and they were gone again the next week.
Wow.
Yeah, so just the drive, the care, the willingness to learn and do better for yourself.
Well, and you said something that I think that's really important for us. You know, I apprenticed as an electrician when I was younger, and I remember being a second-year apprentice. And I and I was in my early 20s, and okay, so I'm going to do this thing where I'm honest. I was pretty arrogant. I got to the place where I thought, man, I really know what I'm doing. And I remember my foreman, he looked at me one day and I was like, yeah, I'm doing some side work and I'm going to do this. And he looked at me and he's like, you don't have any business doing that. You don't know what you're doing yet. And I thought, he doesn't know what he's talking about. And you just said, and you touched on being humble. I would think that's a pretty important part of what it takes to be a good tradesperson, because personally, I really believe that being a tradesperson, or whatever it is, you know, whether you're welding, whether you're doing electrical work, whether you're an excavator, whatever it is, the ability to know that you don't know it all. Because I remember my dad telling me when I was young, some of the best advice he ever gave me was, go out and learn a trade, because I didn't know what I wanted to do, you know. And he's like, go out and learn a trade, get paid to learn, and once you learn that trade, then go do something else. And the funny thing is, I don't feel like I ever learned the trade. Like, I feel like, well, I learned how to do this, and I learned how to do this, and then I learned, oh, I need to know how to do this, and I need to know how to do this. And it's like, and back full circle back to what we were originally talking about, experience. It's like, the more experience that I got, the more that I realized that I didn't know. And so I mean, I think that what you're talking about there is humility in our work, and that's something that I, as a young person, really was missing. I mean, you just all around sound like a better tradesperson from the beginning than I was anyway. So,
yeah, this line of work will humble you very quickly.
Yeah.
Some simple oversight could cost tens of thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
So being humble is a big part of it.
Yeah.
You go into something arrogant and make a mistake, people are less forgiving.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think that's a funny thing with the trades. There's so many aspects of what we do that are a big deal, and we don't realize how humbling that can be. And I mean, that old saying, pride goeth before the fall. Sometimes the fall is really hard and really intense. So you made the shift. You're now your own boss. Let's just talk for a second about your name, because I just think it's totally badass. So why Fortitude Welding?
I mean, I think it represents myself and my journey to where I am now. The strength of leaving. I don't like to talk high about myself at all, so I don't want to come off that way. But
I think it's pretty clear to people listening that you're humble.
But the strength of leaving all the comforts and needs I have, a full-time job like I did, to do something for myself, just because I felt like I could do better, and provide a better service. Now, I do very little of what I used to do, but in general, welding and fabrication work, I like to think I do quite a bit better than what we used to do.
Yeah. Well, I do know some of the projects that you've been involved in, and they're some of them are pretty high end, actually.
Yeah.
And people wouldn't even realize that a small welding shop in Myerstown, Pennsylvania,
Right.
is doing stuff in some of the biggest cities in the country and the world, probably.
Yeah.
So that's pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah. With what I used to do, being a millwright, I guess is the best term for what I used to do, because welding was probably only 40% of it. And it kills me that I didn't take more pictures of what I used to do, because we did so much rigging. We had one of our sister companies was a crane company, and we'd have anything from a 40-ton crane on site on a regular basis all the way up to a 500-ton crane.
That's big.
Yeah. Yeah. And I never took pictures of that because I thought nobody cared. Like, I was just going to work and doing my job.
Right.
So that was when Instagram was kind of just starting out, and welding pictures were going nuts. So like once in a great while when I got to take a welding picture, I'd post that. But I never shared hardly any of my millwright stuff. So that kind of sucks.
Yeah. It's funny, when I was an apprentice, I didn't even have a camera on my phone to be able to do that. And I think back to some of the pictures that I would have loved to take, and I probably wasn't allowed to anyway. So in my case, yeah. I know what you mean, though. Some of the projects and the opportunities that we have in the work that we do, we just end up in some really cool places. Mm-hmm. I mean, I've worked at airports and treatment plants, and probably one of the coolest jobs that I ever was on was in, I want to see if I say this right, Octorara water plant, which is down in and the different things in there. Is like, this is really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm certain I get tons of eye rolls from my kids from the back seat every time we go somewhere. And I work there, I put that up, and my sister-in-law lives out in South Dakota, and we flew out of Harrisburg last year, and we flew over one of the asphalt plants that I put up, and I'm pointing out the window, I put that plant up.
Yeah. I know exactly what you're talking about. My kids do the same thing. We were watching a movie, and they were flying at the end of the movie. They're flying over New York City, and I'm like, that right there, Dad was a part of that, and they're like, Dad, we don't care. Yeah, yeah,
yeah. I hold on to hope that one day they will.
So you have two kids. How old are they?
8 and 10.
Okay.
Yeah.
Girls, boys? What?
I have my son is 10 and my daughter's 8. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So they're not at the age where they take too much interest in this, but once in a while I have them here. I had a video up a couple months ago of my son running the plasma table on the iron worker, and he got to cut out a rocket for his room. So
that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, a little bit of incentive to learn.
My father was a carpenter, and I'll never forget, I think maybe I was 10, and he taught me how to use a bandsaw. Mm-hmm. And I made a birdhouse or something like that. And I even cut my finger because when my dad taught me to use a bandsaw, he thought that was the way for me to learn how to be careful.
Yeah.
And I remember my mom being all angry and frustrated with him, and I didn't even care. Like, I just thought it was so cool that I got to use a power tool.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I always tell my wife that I don't care what the kids do, but they will know how to do this.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's one of the most important things when it comes to the trades and what we do and the problem solving, whether you're an electrician, whether you're a carpenter, whether you're a fabricator or millwright, like you said, the ability to problem solve. I mean, I think that's something that is slipping away. Mm-hmm. And that's probably the most important thing that I learned in going through the trades is learning the ability to problem solve. And I as well, that's probably the thing that I enjoy the most about what we do. It's like there's a problem, and it actually translates across. I don't really work in the field anymore. I'm embarrassed to say that I work in an office, and I mostly work with people, and I mostly am managing and dealing with people, and people do create quite a few problems. But I still am using some of the things that I learned as an apprentice, that I learned as a journeyman, that I learned as an electrician, in how to problem solve and how to deal with things. And I think that's the biggest thing that I think is missing and disappearing from people is the knowledge and the ability to know how to problem solve.
Yeah. Yeah, well, most things can be looked up on your phone anymore, and that doesn't do most people a lot of good.
No. I mean, I was literally just talking with my wife the other day. We were driving somewhere, and my phone died, which was also my GPS, and I didn't know where to go. And we were reminiscing, and this will be a little revealing of my age, but you know, when I first started driving for the first 10 years of my driving life, I kept an atlas in the car. And my son was there, and he's like, "What's an atlas?" And I'm like, "Oh my goodness." Yeah, like he doesn't even know how to read a map, let alone, you know,
right.
GPS just tells you where to go and what to do.
Yep. Yeah. That I know of, there's 2 of the older guys at my old job that are still there, that were there when I started. And those are the guys I learned the most from.
Yeah.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I think a lot of the experience and personal growth, you have to be put through the paces.
Yeah.
Helping people too much is not good either.
Yeah. Yeah. I think for me, I mean, that's the only way that I was able to exercise my mind to be able to learn those things and create those neural pathways to problem solve and do that. And I actually think personally, hardship is one of those things that we need to lean into. You know, I had an epiphany the other day. I was talking with my business partner, and I said, you know, I realized that business has been really hard for us. You know, we've been in business almost 20 years now, and I'm talking with more and more other business people and hearing about the things that they're dealing with and whatnot. And I'm like, wow, if I would have known that it could be that way and we were experiencing what we experienced, I would be like, why am I doing this?
Right.
But I think the thing that I learned is that hardship, when I lean into it and I don't run away from it, I mean, I'll put it to you this way. The things that we don't want to do are probably the things that we absolutely should do.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm by no means anywhere close to where I want to be yet.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to have too many more employees. I'd like to have four really solid guys that can just do anything. Because of what I used to do, I know rigging and heavy industrial work. But yet at the same time, I just had some parts come in today for a pharmaceutical plant.
Yeah.
And we do food grade work for local chocolate plant.
Yeah.
And that type of thing. So I think being well-rounded is also a huge thing to being successful. We are never, ever slow.
Yeah.
And the work is never the same.
I think that you're right. Being well-rounded is, especially in construction or the trade world, I would say it's essential to being successful. And not that you don't find a niche and you focus on something, but having the ability to pivot and be able to do other things. You know, I experienced 2008, and I was in business. You know, we started in 2005, and honestly, in 2005, it was pretty easy. 2007 was pretty easy. And then it was not easy anymore. And the ability to pivot and do this, and this helped us survive that. And I think that it's something that also it continues to keep you sharp, you know. And as you deal with those things and you lean into hardship, it continues to sharpen you. And I don't mean sharp in a bad way, but I mean in a way that you can be effective and you can get right to it. And, you know, because making money is about being efficient. I'll never forget, I worked with an old timer. I wanted to learn, you know, high voltage electrical work and things like that. And so he had his own business doing high voltage work, and nobody else did it in our area. And he was like, I don't know, I want to say something like 60 some years old, which to me at that time in my 20s was like, he was old. But I was fascinated by the fact that he had been doing this job all of his life. And I was fascinated by how he eliminated steps. So he had this line truck, and it had all of the tools that he needed and not any other tools.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and it was like we'd be, getting ready to set a utility pole, and he would get only the things out that he needed to hook up to the pole, to drill, to set, to do all of that. And he knew right where they were. He'd eliminated, like, he didn't take 2 extra steps to look here. He knew where that was on his truck. And honestly, he learned how to think through the process and problem solve. And he had been doing it so long that he got to the place where it was just like natural.
Sure.
It was pretty awesome to watch, actually.
Yeah. Yeah, and unless you have that influence, it's hard to do that on your own. It just takes time.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think that's the biggest thing. If I was going to talk to a young person that's wanting to get into the trades, I would tell them that it takes time, and it's not like you're not going to learn this. You're not going to watch, a 15-minute YouTube video and know how to weld.
Right.
You're not going to watch that video and know how to do a high voltage termination on a utility line. And if you try it without the experience, you end up dead.
Right.
So, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, or somebody else will.
Or somebody else will. Well, with medium and high voltage, usually you do, but
right.
It can affect other people as well, for sure.
Yeah, with welding down the line, you don't weld a base plate on correctly or something like that. It could be bad.
Yeah, for sure. So here you are. You're now experiencing this success. I had to chuckle when you said that you only want 4 employees, because I used to say I only wanted 2, and I have experienced more than that, and I didn't know how to stop.
Yeah.
But I mean, if you continue to instill in people that high quality of work, that work ethic, that culture, it begins to attract people to it. And I actually believe that there is a desire for people that are wanting to work with their hands, that are wanting to create, that are wanting to experience what it is to build something. And I think that's something that's really fascinating about what you do is you guys literally take pieces of metal and you melt them together to create something that is stronger than it was before. And that's pretty fascinating.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. So the other thing that we talked about your name, Fortitude, which I just find really interesting, and I keep going back to it because I see it right over there. I was reading about that because your name struck me, and I think names matter. I think they're important. The thing that I read about Fortitude, they talked about it being courage, but it's more than just courage. It's the ability to continue. And we're talking about things being hard. We're talking about experience and things that you need, and that ability to push and continue. What is it that you've been able to lean on that gives you that ability? Because I mean, my goodness, you still work pretty hard.
Yeah. Probably harder than ever.
Yeah.
Yeah, at least more hours than ever.
Do you still enjoy it?
I do. Yeah, I do. And that's part of not wanting to get bigger than like a 4-person company, is I never want to have to remove myself from building.
Yeah.
I want to be out here building. Like, I guess I could have more employees if I could hire someone that I trust to manage everything.
Yeah.
And then I could stay out here. That would be okay.
So why what is it about building that you love? Because I mean, I can see it when you talk about it. Your whole face changes. Like, you really love it. And I even watch your posts. I mean, anybody that's listening, I would encourage you. It's Sam Welds on Instagram. You have some pretty cool things that you post. Very strategic how you post them too. I'm not sure how many of them you're allowed to actually post, but
oh yeah, some weld close-ups of larger things that I'm not allowed to share. Yeah, most of that stuff I reserve for my stories, so it disappears in 24 hours.
So what is it about building that you love? I mean, because like I said, I can see that in your eyes when you talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, it's just the creative end of it, to be able to take something off the rack and make something that serves a purpose.
Yeah.
Yeah. And for a customer to get it, and certainly not all of them do, but you get the random customer that sees it and appreciates the quality and can tell that it's better than they would get from the Amish shop down the road.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think what you're talking about there is, I think we're all looking for that. I don't know if affirmation is the right word, but that fulfillment in that way. And I've had some pretty. I do think business is hard. I do think the work that we do is hard, and the world that we live in, I think, makes it harder. And so I've had lots of clients and people that we work with that they haven't necessarily appreciated what we do, but then when you get that one who they're like, wow, you did this, you really helped me. I don't want my clients to listen to this, but it's like I almost would do it for free.
Right.
Because it's like, yeah, that's what I want.
Yeah. I've had that conversation before, and I would still do this.
Yeah.
I wouldn't do it 12, 15 hours a day anymore, but I would still do this if I could not get paid and still make a good living.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like I did of all the things that we have going on in here, I repaired a cast aluminum piece for an engine. Some random person just stopped in and had a chunk blown out of the bottom of this aluminum casing. And I welded it up and blended it all smooth, and you couldn't even tell anything happened. And I handed it to him. He was like dumbfounded.
Yeah. I think that's the skill piece of what is dying. I talked with some guys in Nashville a few months ago, and we were talking about the pyramids and how, no one actually knows how they were built. There's all these historians, archaeologists, all these different people that talk about, well, how did that happen? And specifically in your trade and what you're doing, there is a real skill that there's no way to learn that other than doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And the ability to take something like that, reform it, heat that up to a point that you're actually taking it back to when it was forged so that it has that same level of quality or better. That's a skill that is not something that you can't read it in a book and learn it. And I mean, there's things that you need to read and there's things that you need to know. I'm not saying that you don't need to do that, but that skill, that knowledge is disappearing from the world that we live in. And I think that is, shops like yours are really important because this is where you learn things that you don't get to learn when you're in a big company.
Right.
Your guys are getting to experience things and getting to learn things. And I think it also really says something that, and listen, I want to be careful how I say this. I don't want to say I don't have anything against big companies, but it's like, I don't think there's anything wrong with growing. But you have to make sure that you maintain growing in a positive direction. Mm-hmm. And it's like one of the things that I've always experienced with working with smaller guys, everything has its, opportunity, we'll call it. Like where you worked with your dad, you were able to work on some pretty massive projects. You don't work on a small job if it's a 500-ton crane.
Right.
I mean, that's not a small job.
Right.
But when you're in the smaller organizations, you have the ability to do and learn things and problem solve in a way that I don't know if this is true or not, but I would think in a way that you can't in a larger organization.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think from what I've seen, the larger the company, the more you get pushed into this is what you do. You come in here and you run the bandsaw all day, or you weld base plates on beams. I've had an employee like that he came from a shop that he just welded base plates on beams. And if you're content with that, that's great. I was never content with that.
Yeah.
And that's what drove me to the industry that I went in and to do it on my own as well.
So Fortitude, we're talking about the things that your company does. We're talking about the people, the size, and the importance of staying small so that you can maintain that connection with your people so that you can be doing the work. Actually, it sounds like it's mostly about you wanting to be able to do the work and build stuff.
Yeah.
But
yeah. That's really the only reason I went to do this on my own, and the long run in hopes to provide something better for my family.
Yeah. So do you hope that your children, like you commented, well, they're going to know how to do this. Is that something that you hope that your son and daughter might express interest in getting into something like this?
Yeah, to some degree or another. My son seems to favor the more tech side of things. And there's plenty of room for that in this industry. More and more things are going to automation.
Yeah.
I have a CNC plasma table back there, and he loves to sit there and watch that thing run. So, I mean, if I could hire him when I get bigger and get a laser and CNC press brake and those sort of things, and have him do that kind of work where he can kind of express himself in the more tech side of things, but still get his hands dirty, that'd be awesome.
There's a company out there that they have a tagline. I absolutely love it. I don't think they have it copyrighted or anything because I don't know how you would copyright this, but I love this statement: dirty hands, clean money.
Sure.
You know, and I just absolutely, that's one of the best feelings. You know, I do work at a desk more lately, but where I live, my wife actually has a cut flower farm, and it's pretty awesome to go out in the field and work alongside my wife and my kids at the end of the day or even on a weekend. And the weird thing is I actually even find it relaxing. Mm-hmm. But we're doing like hard work, but yet it feels restful. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's really weird, I know, but you know, we'll typically work till 9 o'clock. And I mean, you work till it gets dark. Mm-hmm. Right now, that's not a problem, but yeah, I find it extremely relaxing. So let's talk a little bit about family. So you have a business, you're working 15-hour days, you know, you're making less money than you made before. You said that, so it's okay that I said it. How is that working for your family, and how does that work as a dad, as a husband, all of those things? The reason I'm asking this question is I want to get to, I deal with young people every day who are like, I want to make as much money as fast as I can. And I personally have experienced making really good money and not being satisfied, not being fulfilled, and realizing for me, it wasn't all about money. And I know when I was a kid, people would say that to me, and I'm like, yeah, BS.
Right.
You know? So family for Sam and what you're doing, how is this, and this is a rather personal question, so you can be like, well, we're going to pass on that. But how is that affecting you, and how do you manage that?
My wife manages most of that. Yeah, she gets nearly all the credit there.
Okay.
So I was still traveling when we had our kids, and there's a lot of times I only saw them on the weekends, from infants to several years old.
There's the train that you were talking about. I'm sure we're going to hear
constant.
that on this.
Yeah, you'll hear another one, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, she gets all the credit there. There's several nights a week where she'll bring dinner out here, and the kids will have dinner here at the fab table with me.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. So it's great to be that close to home. That's an option. But I mean, that's how hard work was instilled in me, and I hope I'm doing the same for them.
Yeah.
And I'm very committed to making it to all their sporting events and all those type of things. But day-to-day life, I'm not there nearly to the degree my wife is.
Yeah.
She's running them to practices and archery and soccer and all that stuff. Usually I'm done working by the time it's time to pick them up, and I'll pick them up. But
so when you talk about that, I read a book recently that I think encapsulates what it is that you're saying. And I think this is important to talk about, whether anybody that's listening is young and wanting to get into the trades, or even people that are older, because I didn't learn this early on. But what I think you're talking about is presence over proximity. Like I realized for me, I could be, and I say I realized, my wife actually said this to me and encouraged me to read the book that I read that had it in it. But she's like, I don't want proximity with you. I want presence, meaning that when I am there, I'm there.
Yep, you're there. You're committed.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And personally, it's like when you talk about your kids coming out and having dinner with you at the fab table, that's presence.
Yep.
That's not proximity.
Right.
And honestly, it sounds like that's something that your father instilled in you, with presence versus proximity. It doesn't mean that you don't work hard, you don't work long days, but when he's there, he's there. Mm-hmm. And I think that's something as tradesmen and tradeswomen, you know, the fact of the matter is, you got to work till the job is done. That's just the reality.
Yep.
And if you don't, it's one of those things that is happening more and more because there are less and less of us to do the work.
Mm-hmm.
And if we can grasp that proximity, versus presence is the issue, that can really change things. Because for me, I can think of growing up as a kid and working with my dad. My first job literally was, he was a carpenter, and I would follow him around the job site, and he would pay me to clean up stuff. He totally underpaid me, and I'm sure it was like child labor violations, but I loved it. And I was with him. I was experiencing that with him. And I think that that's one of the things, like you're talking about here, is, it's not about necessarily not working, but when you are there, you're there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. I mean, I get to see, on a weeknight, I see my kids 2 to 3 hours from when I get home to bedtime.
Yeah.
But yeah, I try and make it count.
Yeah. That's what we have to do. And I actually don't think that that's all that different for most people, no matter what your career is,
Yep.
And the question is, my wife has called me out more than a few times on putting down my phone and being there.
Yep.
And there are things that just steal that time away, and we have to be, diligent in pressing through it. Like we said earlier in the podcast, like, if you don't want to do it, and not that I don't want to be with my kids, but it's like, to be intentional takes work.
Mm-hmm.
And, that's what we want to do. We want to be intentional about what we do. And I mean, it even comes back to the work that you're doing. You want to be intentional for the client. You want to be intentional for the customer. You want to be intentional for your guys.
Mm-hmm.
And, I can see that. Well, just a couple of other things. We talked about you're self-employed now. You're experiencing that. You're in control, and that's a positive for you. Talking about your family and that journey. I guess one of the things that when we're talking about the work that you're doing, I always ask this question of people. If you were talking with someone and they have no experience in what we do, they have no knowledge of what we do, like they don't even know that there are opportunities to learn. Like, you went to shop class,
Mm-hmm.
and your dad's like, well, change that to welding. You want to
Yeah.
weld. What is it that you would encourage? And I don't want to say young people, because, when I was an apprentice, I sat in class with a guy that was 45 years old and starting a new career, and he was learning how to be an electrician. And he had to make sacrifices for that. But we talked about this. It's not all about money. What would you say to someone who is wanting to change their career, because you've done that? Like you've gone from the big corporate, you've made that shift, and you have the authority to speak to something that not many people have that authority to speak to. So what would you say to people who are like, well, I'm working in the healthcare industry, but I really want to work with my hands?
Yeah.
Like, what would you say to that?
It's no easy road by any means.
Yeah.
So if that's the route they're looking for, that's definitely not for them.
Yeah.
But there's such a reward to it, to be able to tackle more and more tasks as you gain experience and knowledge, and to work as hard as you can on something and stand back and say, I built that.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's what I enjoy of it.
Yeah. Well, I think that I would agree with that. An extreme sense of pride. We've talked about how we tell our kids the things that we were a part of, and I think that's important. I think one of the things, I recently read this poem, and it was called the Proof of Your Worth, and the beginning said, through victories, proof of the skill that you possess. Though victory is the proof of the skill that you possess, defeat is the proof of your grit. And it goes on to say, a weakling can smile in his days of success, but trouble's the first sign he will quit. And I think we talked about this early on. I think it's really important for people to realize hard things aren't bad.
Right.
I have a business partner, and the proof of his worth has come from the hardships that we have seen together that we've decided to go through. And that's the stuff that matters, I think. You know, even when you're on the job and you have a project. I recently was with some guys and they were talking, and I didn't even know this. We had a company-wide meeting, and 4 of the guys were there, and they had worked till almost midnight in another state. Went home, probably slept for about 2 or 3 hours, and came to an early company meeting about safety. And they're sitting there and they're talking with me, and they didn't mind sacrificing the sleep. Now it's easy for me to say that. They probably would have another thought, but they didn't mind sacrificing the sleep because they knew that they were doing a job that was important, that needed to get done. And they were very proud of the work that they did. And I think the proof of our worth comes from when hardship comes, when things go wrong, what is the fortitude with which you go after that? What is the courage that you apply and continue to press on through that? I think that's pretty important.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, it says everything about your character.
Yeah.
When you're out, the conditions are bad, and you still have to stay out there and get a job done, or you could throw your hands up in the air and go home.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's something that that's really attractive to the people that continue to do this. You said earlier on, if you want something easy, this isn't for you. And I would say construction, building, whatever it is, in the trades world, if you want easy, it's probably not for you.
Right.
I mean, and the other fact of the matter is I think that we're pretty unappreciated. And I don't mean that, I'm not complaining when I say that, but it's like, I was talking with a guy the other day, and he was talking about, he doesn't really think about things until they don't work.
Right.
You know? And then when they don't work, then it's an issue.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Sam, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with us tonight. I think that you have a really cool story.
Appreciate it.
The legacy and the history of what your dad instilled in you is hard work, you know, and then transitioning that to you going out on your own. I mean, I just want to commend you for the bravery and the courage that takes. No, I made that decision myself as well, and that's a big deal. It is a big deal, and it doesn't always go the way that we want. You know, I'm a little farther along in that process than you, and I will say, it's been really hard, but I have no regrets.
Yeah. Yeah, the harder it is, it seems the more rewarding it is.
I would agree. I mean, if there's one thing that people are getting from what we're talking about here, it's that hard things are where we should be. If it's hard, we should lean into it. We should go after it. If you're feeling like you don't want to do it, then you probably should be doing it.
Right.
So, yeah. Well, I really appreciate your time here tonight. And
likewise.
I appreciate what you're doing. I think that the projects that you're working on and the things that you're doing are essential to the society that we are living and experiencing those things. And people don't realize it. And it really matters. And the people that you're training here and the people that you're talking to that are working with you day in and day out, I personally believe that the knowledge that's being lost, the only way to maintain that is through mentorship. And you're doing that. And so I just want to say thank you because I really appreciate that. And while it is hard, it's not about Sam, but it's about the next generation. It's about the people that we do the work for. And if we can share with people what it is to build something and to do something, and they can have that epiphany, that knowledge explosion of, wow, this is fulfilling and it's not all about money. I mean, listen, we need money. We need things like that to live our lives and to do those things and to pay the bills and to keep the lights on. But you don't need as much as you think you do.
Sure.
I mean, and you've spoken to that a little bit. You have a lot less than you used to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. The trades are hard enough. And when you do self-employment in the trades,
Yeah.
it's just that much harder.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm fortunate to never really have to look for work. It's all been word of mouth. It all finds me. So for the most part, it's just managing it all, keeping it straight and keeping the quality there, and also putting as much out the door as we can.
Yeah. So if someone was going to go out on their own and kind of give it their own shot, what would be the advice that you would give them?
Make sure you really want it.
Yeah.
Yeah. You have to really, really want it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because there's plenty of opportunities in shops out there to make a great living and do a rewarding job. But to do something for yourself, you need to really, really want it.
Well, and I would think it's something that, like, you didn't just go out and do it on your own. A lot of people need to realize, and me too, when I was arrogant and young and thought I knew it all, experience takes time.
Yep.
And, not only do you need to really want it, you need to be able to build up that experience and learn in that regard. I think that's the other thing that I find really fascinating that, and I might have already said this, but it's worth saying again. I recently interviewed someone, and she shared with me how, when she was in high school and things, the guidance counselors she had really good grades, and they didn't even tell her about school or the trade schools or shop class or anything like that. They didn't even tell her about it. And she went into a career in the healthcare sector, and she's like, I just thought that that's what I was supposed to do because that's what everybody told me I was supposed to do. And then she had this revelation when she realized that she was miserable in her job. She was making really good money, and she was still miserable in what she was doing. And she's like, I want to work with my hands. And then she got a job at like a fabrication shop, like working on cars and things like, well, that's funny that you had a race car shop. And then she went from there and found out that she really liked troubleshooting and electrical work and looking at PLCs and things like that. And she absolutely loves it. And the thing that was really disappointing to me was, I believe that our culture and society has so, Mike Rowe says this, these jobs are so unimportant that we're not even going to show them to you.
Yep.
And it was like a gut punch, for they didn't even offer, her guidance counselors didn't even say that there was an option here. And I think that's something that we need to change, is that as a culture, we need to be saying, for two reasons. One, some people are wired that way, and that's what they're made for. Two, society needs that.
Yep.
Like, if you don't have fabricators, if you don't have, millworks, if you don't have electricians, carpenters, masons, we're going to have problems. So, well, thank you for joining me here on the line.
Absolutely.
I really appreciate Fortitude Welding hosting us here, and I think what you guys do is really cool. So
I appreciate it.
Yeah, cool.